Here in the beauty of the Great Northwest in Portland, Oregon, a controversy has been brewing for some time. Oregon was the first state in the nation to legalize physician-assisted suicide. Today, in the first of a two-part series, we'll be exploring physician-assisted suicide, and I'll be talking to two doctors, one of whom specializes in controlling pain. Stay with us.
I will neither prescribe nor administer a lethal dose of medicine, even if asked, nor counsel any such thing.
These are the words written in the Hippocratic Oath and inspired by the Greek physician Hippocrates. Today, these words hold little value to some physicians willing to help a patient commit suicide through a lethal mix of medications. This practice is legal in Oregon and Washington. Reba DeTournay, a registered nurse and Dean Emeritus of Washington's University School of Nursing, once voted for physician-assisted suicide, but today she's changed her opinion. What was your opinion of the Death with Dignity Act, say, before 2007?
I believe people had a right to their own destiny. I believed in autonomy very, very strongly. And I figured it's their life to do with what they want. I don't think that I would have used this for myself, but I really felt one shouldn't interfere in individual rights. I was running around and actually giving talks about this initiative. I did vote for it, but I was glad it didn't pass. Now that's really crazy, but I'm being honest about this. And then when it became Initiative 1000, I had changed my views.
Initiative 1000, also known as the Death with Dignity Act, was voted in during the November 2008 elections in Washington State. Eileen Geller, a hospice nurse and the executive director of the Coalition Against Assisted Suicide, strived to educate voters about the truth behind Initiative 1000. So tell me what the Death with Dignity Act really is.
The Death with Dignity Act is actually assisted suicide and medicalized killing. It's really legalizing assisted suicide. And there's really nothing dignified about helping people to die by suicide.
Well, it's called the Death with Dignity Act. So where does the dignity come in for a patient who's got 6 months to live?
It's called the Death with Dignity Act, but there isn't something dignified about someone being killed and having their life prematurely ended. I've been a hospice nurse for 25 years, and I would say that my life's work is helping people to live with real dignity and die naturally.
Reba was a proponent for physician-assisted suicide and believed everyone has the right to choose how they die. But then her husband, Rudy, was diagnosed with a terminal illness at the age of 93, and Reba found herself siding with natural death.
Rudy was told that he had pancreatic cancer and that in all probability he would live for just a few months. And he declined to have further testing at that time. He told the physician, look, I'm not going to treat it no matter what, so there's no sense going through any kind of invasive testing. So we really didn't know the extent of the pathology or what was happening with him. When he first got his diagnosis, he announced he really wished that the Death with Dignity had passed. And I said to him, well, just wait. And I said, I promise you I will not let you suffer. He lived for 28 months. And they were a good 28 months. We were able to control his pain relatively easily. We were able to control his anxiety. And I wouldn't miss that period of time for anything.
Does your opinion or his opinion about the Death with Dignity Act come from any religious point of view?
No, none whatsoever, with neither of us.
So you're looking at it more from a humanitarian point?
I am, and as I said, I think it's dangerous when a society sanctions killing.
In Oregon, where assisted suicide is legal, there are serious problems. An independent study shows 1 in 4 people getting lethal drugs suffer from depression. Health plans recommend assisted suicide to save costs, like the letter sent to one patient.
They would pay to kill me, but they will not give me the medication to try to stop the growth of my cancer.
Barbara Wagner passed away October 18th, but she left a final message.
People of Washington, don't vote this in.
Barbara Wagner was a woman in her young 60s who unfortunately had lung cancer, and she was in remission from the initial treatment for the lung cancer, and then after a period of a couple of years, the lung cancer was found to be back. She went to her oncologist, and the oncologist recommended a drug that had been out for 10 years, Tarceva, produced by Genentech. And when she tried to get that drug covered and get the prescription filled, it was denied by the Oregon Health Plan, the Medicaid program for the poor in the state of Oregon. And in the same letter that she was given a denial for the drug that would be palliative for her, it was therapy that was supposed to slow the growth of the tumor in some people and certainly make you feel better while you were taking it, so you'd have better life while you lived, whenever you died. And in fact, it would give her a 45% chance, increased chance of being alive at 1 year than if she weren't taking the drug. That's what the data shows. I know, I've looked at it. But in the same letter, she was offered only palliative care options, meant things like pain relief and nausea treatment and the like. But they wouldn't give her radiation, they wouldn't give her any treatment for her cancer, including Tarceva, because she was judged to have less than a 5% chance of being alive in 5 years, statistically. The letter basically said, well, we'll pay 100% for your palliative care, including assisted suicide. So here's a woman who never asked for assisted suicide, who's now being offered it by the full force of the state of Oregon.
When we return, we'll hear about a few of the problems with the law in Oregon and Washington and how a patient's needs are overlooked.
Whether you're a student needing answers, a parent needing help, or a concerned citizen wanting to make a difference, Life Issues Institute has the resources you need to put your values into action. Life Issues Institute is an international educational organization committed to protecting innocent human life. Life Issues Institute knows what it takes. That's why millions throughout the world turn here for help. Life Issues Institute has authored more pro-life publications than any other entity in the world, and its materials are printed in over 30 languages. Radio broadcasts, newsletters, and a website filled to the brim with the answers you're looking for are just a click away. Go to facinglife.tv and click on the link to Life Issues Institute to find out more about how you can change the heart of a nation.
What do you think about when you hear the words death with dignity? What comes to mind when I say physician-assisted suicide? I met with Dr. William Toffler to find out how semantics has played a role in legalizing assisted suicide in Oregon.
You and I have dignity regardless of how old we are, regardless of how disabled we are. We have intrinsic worth that is incalculable. And the idea of saying the only way you can have dignity is to kill yourself is a tremendously fallacious point that's being carried about every time a news media person uses the euphemism that labels a bill, like the so-called Death with Dignity Act in Oregon or its counterpart in the state of Washington. These are absolute euphemisms designed to fool people. Because if you use the actual words, do you think doctors and healthcare bureaucracy should be empowered, licensed to give massive overdoses so people can kill themselves? You have a tremendous drop in the people who are enthusiastic about that. And yet that's exactly what we're talking about.
Tell me what the parameters of this act are, how it's presented and structured.
Well, the promoters of assisted suicide present it as being extremely limited, as having to meet 16 different safeguards, so-called safeguards. But the safeguards are as weak as wet tissue paper. They have no substance. The idea of a person having 6 months to live is the only person who can avail themselves. Well, we have no crystal balls in our doctor bag. There's no crystal ball reading course in medical school. So the whole notion that we can clearly decide who has 6 months or 6 years to live is specious.
Well, what safeguards do they say is built into this?
You have people who request this at least one time in writing and orally, and you wait 15 days, and all this is supposed to be a cooling off period. And then you have a massive lethal overdose sitting in the cabinet at home. And they're supposed to only take it themselves. Well, we've had people who couldn't swallow it. What about the people who can't swallow it? Isn't it a violation of the American Disabilities Act that everybody have equal access to this paradigm? Well, the answer is we don't know how people who can't swallow kill themselves. When you've got this lethal cocktail at home of deadly medication, who's to say that the so-called loved one isn't administering it against the person's will, and who would ever know? Who would check?
You're familiar with the situation in Oregon, which is pretty much the same thing of what Washington voters just passed, correct?
I am familiar with the situation in Oregon. It's actually not exactly the same. Initiative 1000, or the Death with Dignity Act here in Washington, has some added dangers and problems that Oregon doesn't have. There's some very specific differences between the two laws, though the bulk of them have some similarities, some crossovers.
So what specifically are the differences?
Well, one, they've changed the definition of self-administer, which sounds kind of like a casual thing, and when you read through it you think, oh, well, you know, self-administer, what does that mean? Self-administer in Washington's Death with Dignity Act means the word ingest. Now, I can tell you as a medical person that ingest means to swallow, or even inhalation, or to be put through a tube like a tube feeding. Ingest means they take it into themselves. So the patient needs to ingest it is the definition of self-administer, which means it very much opens non-voluntary administration of drugs. Also, the definition of competent does not include somebody, they say, in Washington and in Oregon, can be severely depressed and still qualify for receiving a lethal drug overdose and for having no diagnosis or treatment of their depression first. There's no mandate for anything like that. Actually, Washington's law mandates, so they must falsify the death certificate. A doctor must lie on the death certificate, so the Bureau of Vital Statistics cannot track how many people are dying from this. Another thing that it does is it changes our public disclosure laws so that media or anyone, any watchdog agency cannot figure out what's really happening, who's dying from this, do they really have terminal diagnoses?
So there's no way to monitor who's using this?
Well, you've actually just come to the real crux of it, which is that in fact, all of these so-called safeguards are really built for rogue doctors, the couple who will do assisted suicide, because in Oregon most won't, but they're all built on the time of the request. So you have to have, a couple physicians sign and 2 witnesses at the time of the request. There are no witnesses at the time of death.
Coming up, Dr. Mark Colgren will talk about the importance of pain management and how this could leave patients feeling like suicide is the only answer.
Thank you for inviting us into your home. Each week we feature real people who deal with real-life issues head-on. Some of their experiences are uplifting, while others will break your heart. But in the end, the message is clear. Those who follow biblical principles on the issues of life are blessed. Become a partner with us in providing a positive, life-affirming message to help change the way the next generation values innocent human life. Please consider a generous gift to help offset the costs of producing this important quality programming. You can donate on our secure website at facinglife.tv or by calling the phone number on your screen during normal business hours. Together, we can make a real difference for life.
What actually brings a person to the point of wanting to commit suicide? Is it depression, severe pain, fear of being a burden to their family? Are they coerced?
I think there's a little bit of danger, or a lot of danger, with coercion. And people say, who can coerce? Well, as I told you, when I was caring for Rudy, I was not always an angel. I got irritated with him. And I remember the once that he said to me, I still feel enormously guilty, and he said to me, "You'd be better off if I weren't here." And I said, "No, I would not be better off if you weren't here." But what if he decided, that's it? My life isn't worth anything and I'm making her unhappy, and so I'm going to sign those papers and go. That's coercion.
Do you think that depression and anxiety preys on vulnerable patients at that time in their life?
Absolutely. Supposedly, one of the safeguards with the law is that people who ask for it are referred to a psychiatrist or a mental health professional, let me put it that way. And that is not always happening.
There are many, many, many stories of people in Oregon who are negatively affected. That, there are people who are depressed. In fact, a recent study showed that fully a third of people who were given lethal prescriptions, in fact, were clinically depressed. Now, these people, of 58 people in this study, 48 were provided by the pro-suicide advocacy group Compassionate Choices. These people were pre-selected as people they didn't think were depressed, so they could skew the study, and still the study showed that these people are what we know nationally to be the case and internationally, which is that people, of course, struggle with depression when they have a serious or life-threatening illness, and that when we treat that depression, they no longer are suicidal. This is the same with uncontrolled pain. When people have pain, they want to die, and when we control that pain, that goes away.
Dr. Mark Colgren is a pain management specialist living in Portland, Oregon, who says severe untreated pain can lead to suicidal thoughts. Can it lead someone to really want to commit suicide?
Yes, not only can it, I certainly have seen that. And you ask a good question, because it gets into the arena of depression and mood and the sensation of pain. And my take on this, and most people that are involved with chronic pain would tell you that there isn't pain and sleep problems and depression. These things all kind of coexist together, and it's the old chicken or the egg thing. I mean, if the pain wasn't there, would the patient be depressed? If the patient wasn't depressed, would the pain be there? If you had pain long enough, you, me, or anybody else, you will develop a depression in all likelihood. It's extremely common.
And if untreated?
Well, either. I mean, if you don't treat pain effectively, it can do all kinds of very harmful things to the body. It can increase levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Severe untreated pain by itself is extremely harmful to the body. Severe depression is, of course, extremely harmful, and if the two are existing together and aren't being treated or aren't being addressed correctly, I mean, it's a bad combination.
When a patient is diagnosed with a terminal illness, there are many options available to increase their quality of life. Pain management is one of those options. So isn't the Death with Dignity Act simply another choice for a dying patient? Dr. Toffler says no.
We've empowered the government, we've empowered doctors, we've empowered healthcare bureaucracies, and we've taken away choice for patients. And this is, I think, the most tragic aspects of this. It's being sold to the public as new option, new choices, when it's actually doing nothing. Patients, and again, I'm not recommending this, have the option of ending their lives. It's not rocket science. What we're doing is empowering doctors. We're licensing doctors. I have a capacity in the state of Oregon as a licensed doctor in the state of Oregon to do what's illegal still in 49 other states, including Washington, until it actually gets through the bureaucratic hurdles. So it's unethical. It's illegal in some other states, and yet I'm empowered. I'm given rights in the state of Oregon to do what is unthinkable, unconscionable, unethical, illegal in the majority of other states.
Next, we'll meet the former Assistant U.S. Surgeon General Bud Mayer, who was told he has months left to live, but refuses assisted suicide.
Whether you're a student needing answers, a parent needing help, or a concerned citizen wanting to make a difference, Life Issues Institute has the resources you need to put your values into action. Life Issues Institute is an international educational organization committed to protecting innocent human life. Life Issues Institute knows what it takes. That's why millions throughout the world turn here for help. Life Issues Institute